Every now and then, I come across really creative people, really inspired people who have fantastic ideas about something they want to do. Sometimes it's something a work of art. Sometimes it's a an idea around research that could be groundbreaking. Other times it is a business idea, so to speak. And then one of oftentimes in those conversations we go back and forth, try to examine the idea, try to take it apart, think about pros and cons, basically analyze the idea. And then sometimes we analyze the ideas to death. Ultimately, we don't take anything forward, which is what I described in a separate conversation as paralysis by analysis, where you suffer from decision paralysis. But anyways, I digress. So recently, I came across a friend of mine who started with an idea, brought it to life, and it's the idea is thriving. And I've also come up with a couple of ideas over time in my head about a lot of different things that I want to do. And sometimes we sit with it maybe for too long. And then this brings me to something I came across a couple of years ago. I think it was I don't remember the particular event, but it was a speech made by Mark Zuckerberg and the founder of Facebook and Meta. And one of the things he said that particularly struck me was that ideas don't come out fully formed. In other words, when you have an idea and you've thought about it and you've done your research, done your analysis, particularly as it relates to businesses or innovative ideas or groundbreaking seminal works, it's important to understand that when you start out, you may think things are clear, but things are not always clear. And in some cases, things are not clear, but will only become clear when you start. And so I put it sort of in perspective. Um, if you look at anybody who has carried out a proper PhD research, you will find out that what they started out with and what they finished with most times are not the same. Either the aim of the study would have changed, and the initial thoughts they had when they went to the research would have changed. The initial answers they thought they would have arrived at when they started the research would have been something entirely different. So what always happens is that the idea they came in, the concepts they came in with will usually have shaped or metamorphosed into something else. And that's why the concept of starting is very, very important. I think it was Jordan Peterson who said, start where you can start. And then more so within the entrepreneurship business side of things, one of the other reasons why it's important to start is that sometimes you start out with one specific business area in mind, maybe even a niche in mind. But then when you start out the business, you find out that the niche which you had initially identified as where you want to compete in is not the niche that you should be competing in. You can find something entirely different. And there are multiple cases of this. I think with Instagram, for instance, Instagram started as a mobile check-in app. And the founders eventually found out that people were not really interested in the check-in part. They were more interested in posting pictures, and it became something else. And I think YouTube as well was also originally designed, if memory serves me right, as a video dating app, something like that. And obviously, we know what YouTube is now. So it's interesting because if they hadn't started and they hadn't collected data, feedback, or they hadn't spent time to understand what the users were telling them and what the marketplace was telling them, they wouldn't have been able to identify an area to compete and dominate. And that's why the statement that Zuckerberg made, whereby he said, ideas are rarely ever fully formed, is very, very important. And more so when I give the examples I give of Instagram and YouTube, and there are many examples there. I think there's Slack, there's even Twitter. You can research it and you find out that what they are doing now is not what they started out as. And the concept around these things is that there's a guy called Stafford Beer. I think he said a system is what it does, not what it claims to do. And in other words, it means a system is what it does, not in some cases not what it was designed to do. So you might design one thing, and I think that's the same thing with this product. Listerine. I think it was originally designed for something else, and along the pathway they discovered mouthwash. But anyways, the whole point I'm trying to make here is that with ideas, you have to sit with them for a while, think about it, but things don't become fully clear until you've started. And I think I also saw a video of a guy some time ago who was analyzing Iron Man 2, the Iron Man 2 movie, and how if Tony hadn't um, tested and prototyped and tested and tested and tested, in the case where he, I don't know, for those who may have seen the movie, I don't know if, for those who haven't seen the movie, I apologize. There's an example of the other guy who used a similar prototype to fight Tony Stark in the Iron Man suit, and Tony flew into this atmosphere, and then eventually, obviously, the higher you go, the cooler it becomes. Eventually, the suit froze. The person who was chasing him hadn't tested it out on their own, so they didn't know to anticipate the problem. But because Tony had actually experienced it by himself in the past, he was able to have solved, prepared a solution for that problem. Whereas the enemy, the villain in the issue, in the case, hadn't prepared for that situation. So this is it's basically it is in starting, you're able to continue to test and prototype and reprototype, and then ultimately find in business a niche. And in research, you iterate and iterate and iterate until you find something groundbreaking, as the case may be. So, I guess what I'm simply trying to say is that ultimately, if you sit with an idea and you don't test it out, right, you're just going to be in one of the idea graveyards. I guess what I'm trying to tell maybe myself, not even anyone else, what I'm trying to tell myself is that once again, pull the trigger. The idea, the eventual roadmap. While you have a roadmap, the all the eventual branches of the roadmap will become clearer as you proceed in executing whatever idea you have, be it business, be it academic, be it research, whatever the case may be. You actually have to start for you to get feedback and for you to produce anything tangible. So yeah, I think this is more for myself than for anybody.